Last time we looked at 50 things only 70s kids would remember, and you loved it. So I had to make a part 2. And if this video gets enough likes, I might turn it into a full series of nostalgic deep dives for fans of this era. So here we go, 50 more things from the 70s that only those who grew up back then will remember. Space food sticks.
Space Food Sticks, the energy snack from U.S. Aerospace Research and Pillsbury.
These revolutionary snacks perfectly captured the space-age optimism of the 1970s. Marketed as astronaut food, these chewy, cylindrical treats came in chocolate and peanut butter flavors, making every kid feel like they were in NASA training. The texture was unique. Not quite a protein bar, not quite taffy, but entirely memorable. Pillsbury, who created them for NASA's space program, made them available to the public at a time when anything space-related was considered cutting edge. Kids would trade them at lunch, debate which flavor was better, and pretend they were preparing for their next mission to the moon. Though they might seem slightly strange by today's standards, they represented the future of food in the minds of 70s children. Speaking of strange but beloved foods from the 70s, nothing was quite as peculiar as what came next in our breakfast cereals. Freakies cereal.
You too can have crunchy, sugary Freakies cereal every morning.
This wasn't just another breakfast cereal, it was an entire mythology in a box. The stars were 7 quirky monster mascots: Boss Moss, Cow Mumble, Grumble, and their gang, each with distinct personalities that kids couldn't get enough of. The cereal itself was sweet and crunchy, but what really set it apart was the coveted plastic Freakies Treehouse Premium. Getting your hands on one of these made you instantly popular at school. The commercial storyline about the Freakies discovering their magical treehouse and the treasure of Freakies cereal captured children's imaginations, making breakfast time an adventure. The characters were so beloved that kids would collect everything Freakies related they could find. And speaking of collecting things in the 70s, another popular activity was about to shrink its way into our hearts: Muppet Shrinky Dinks.
Hour after hour, welcome to the magical world of Shrinky Dinks.
The magical combination of the Muppet Show characters and Shrinky Dinks technology created an unforgettable Kraft experience. Kids would carefully color these special plastic sheets featuring Kermit, Miss Piggy, and the gang, then watch in amazement as they transformed in the oven. The anticipation while waiting for them to shrink was intense. Would they curl up properly? Would they flatten out? The distinctive smell of baking plastic would fill the house, sometimes pleasantly, sometimes not so much if you left them in too long. Successfully creating a batch of perfectly shrunk Muppets was considered a real achievement in any 70s household. Of course, if you wanted something that lasted even longer than a Shrinky Dink, there was always that legendary candy bar, Marathon Bar.
No one eats a marathon bar quick. A marathon lasts a good long time.
This iconic candy bar was famous for one spectacular feature: its incredible 8-inch length. Made of braided caramel covered in chocolate, it even came with a ruler printed right on the package to prove its impressive size. The marketing was genius, promoting it as the candy bar you can't eat quickly, which naturally made every kid want to try. Marathon bars became a status symbol in school cafeterias, and breaking one out meant instant popularity. The wrapper's distinctive red and yellow stripes made it instantly recognizable, and kids would save up their allowance just to buy one. While marathon bars were all about taking your time, some toys of the era were all about quick action, especially Rock'em Sock'em robots.
A left, knock his block off, and you're the winner.
I want a rematch.
This iconic toy brought boxing excitement right to your fingertips with 2 mechanical pugilists, one red, one blue, ready to duke it out at your command. Found in nearly every department store's toy section, it became an unofficial testing ground for kids dragged along on shopping trips. The satisfying pop of your opponent's robot head flying up after a perfectly landed punch was the ultimate victory moment. The real magic wasn't just in winning though, it was in the countless rematches, the friendly trash talk, and the way even complete strangers would gather around store displays to watch impromptu tournaments unfold. Zoom on PBS and the ubby-dubby language. Before there was TikTok or YouTube, there was Zoom, a revolutionary kids show that made learning feel like hanging out with friends. The show's secret weapon was ubby-dubby, a playful language that inserted ub before every vowel sound. It spread through playgrounds like wildfire, becoming a secret code among kids who wanted to confuse their parents and teachers. The Zoom cast members, dressed in their signature striped shirts, would teach science experiments, games, and creative projects, but nothing caught on quite like this peculiar way of speaking. Kids would spend hours practicing, turning simple phrases like "hello, my name is" into tongue-twisting challenges that only other Zoom fans could understand. And speaking of collecting things that made you feel part of a special club, collecting empty Pepsi and Coke bottles for deposit refunds. This wasn't just recycling, it was a kid's first taste of entrepreneurship. Armed with wagons and determination, children would scour neighborhoods, parks, and ditches for discarded bottles, each worth a precious nickel or dime. It was like a treasure hunt with real rewards. The local store owners knew every kid by name, as they'd regularly appear with arms full of glass bottles, carefully counting their earnings. This wasn't just about making money, it was about independence, responsibility, and the thrill of turning trash into treasure. Some clever kids even worked out regular collection routes from neighbors, building their first business ventures. But while kids were learning about earning money, television was teaching them about being uniquely different. The bizarre, creepy 7-Up Uncola ads.
Don't you feel good about 7-Up?
These commercials were a perfect encapsulation of 70s advertising weirdness. Actor Jeffrey Holder, dressed in white against a black background, would laugh his deep, infectious laugh while explaining why 7-Up was the uncola. His commanding presence and the psychedelic visuals made these ads both mesmerizing and slightly unsettling. The campaign was so effective that uncola became part of the everyday vocabulary, and kids would imitate Holder's distinctive laugh on playgrounds. These ads weren't just selling a soft drink, they were selling an alternative lifestyle in a bottle. Speaking of unique marketing approaches that captured kids' imaginations, the Flintstones playset from Hardee's.
Closed, it's a carrying case. The Flintstone playset.
Before McDonald's Happy Meals became the gold standard of fast food toys, Hardee's created something truly special with their Flintstones Village collection. This wasn't just a single toy, it was an entire prehistoric world that grew with each visit. The detailed plastic pieces included houses, cars, and all the beloved characters from Bedrock. Kids would beg their parents to go to Hardee's, not for the food, but for the chance to add another piece to their growing collection. The way the pieces fit together encouraged creativity and hours of imaginative play. And while some kids were playing with their Flintstone sets, others were dreaming about being cowboys thanks to the Dingo Boots commercial. The marketing genius of these commercials lay in their simplicity. Just a rugged cowboy leaning against a fence, emanating pure cool. The whispered tagline, "You need a pair of dingoes," felt less like advertising and more like friendly advice from someone who knew what cool really was. These boots became the must-have footwear for any kid wanting to capture that effortless Western style. Whether you actually got a pair or just dreamed about them, those commercials left an indelible mark on what we thought cool looked like in the 70s. Those boots might have made us feel cool, but were they your favorite 70s memory? Drop a comment below with what you loved most about growing up in the 70s. Don't forget to hit subscribe and smash that like button if you're enjoying this nostalgic journey. And speaking of 70s memories that tested our cool, the frustration of Simon saying beep, beep, buzz.
You never know who might win until the game is done. Frustration! Frustration is so much fun!
Simon wasn't just a game. It was a test of memory, patience, and nerves. The sleek circular design with its 4 colored buttons seemed deceptively simple. Just repeat the pattern of lights and sounds. But as the sequences grew longer, so did the tension. That dreaded buzz sound when you made a mistake was heartbreaking, especially when you were just one button away from beating your personal record. In basements and living rooms across America, kids would gather around this electronic marvel, holding their breath as they tried to keep up with its increasingly complex patterns. Everyone claimed to have a cousin who reached level 20, but nobody could ever prove it. And while Simon was testing our memories, another piece of pop culture was testing our wallets. Star Wars trading cards with the stale pink gum. These weren't just trading cards, they were precious windows into a galaxy far, far away. Coming in distinctive blue, red, and green series, each pack was a mystery waiting to be unveiled. The cards featured scenes from the movie, behind-the-scenes photos, and character portraits that kids would trade, collect, and protect like treasured artifacts. The infamous pink gum that came with them was notoriously hard and flavorless, but nobody bought them for the gum anyway. The real thrill was in completing your collection and having the rarest cards in school. Some kids even kept the gum as a trophy, rock hard and inedible as it was. Of course, not everything from the 70s was about collecting treasures. Sometimes it was about making do with what you had. The NONAME sneakers from Kmart. In an era where brand consciousness was beginning to take hold, these sneakers were both a blessing and a curse. They were the affordable alternative to popular brands like Converse or Pumas, but wearing them could make you the target of playground teasing. Yet, looking back, they represent a simpler time, when practicality often won over style. Many kids learned valuable lessons about materialism and self-worth through these humble sneakers, even if the lessons weren't always easy. And sometimes, those who mocked them the most were secretly wearing them too. But if you thought those sneakers were embarrassing, wait until you remember this next fashion trend: the awkwardness of wearing a one-piece velour jumpsuit. The 70s had some questionable fashion choices, but few were as memorable as the velour jumpsuit. These one-piece wonders came in every color imaginable and promised to make you look like a disco star. Instead, they usually made you look like a sweaty, uncomfortable mess. The synthetic fabric didn't breathe, making summer wear particularly challenging. Yet somehow, everyone had at least one, and family photos from the era are filled with children and adults alike sporting these plush fashion statements. The zippers would often get stuck halfway, turning a simple bathroom break into an Olympic event. And speaking of places where you definitely didn't want your jumpsuit to malfunction, the McDonald's McDonaldland playground with the dizzying Big Mac climber. Every McDonald's restaurant was a wonderland of potentially dangerous play equipment, but nothing was more iconic than Officer Big Mac's giant head-shaped climber. This metal cage-like structure, designed to look like the policeman character's head, was both thrilling and slightly terrifying. Kids would scramble up the bars, slide down the poles, and occasionally get stuck in the jail openings. The burning hot metal slides in summer and the freezing cold chains in winter were just part of the adventure. Parents today would probably faint at the sight of these safety-optional playgrounds, but back then, they were pure magic. And while some kids were mastering the Big Mac climber, others were about to experience an even wilder ride: the Evel Knievel stunt cycle toy that launched like a rocket.
Evel Knievel stunt cycle.
This wasn't just another toy, it was a miniature daredevil in your own home. The iconic red launcher with its Energizer gear was a marvel of 70s engineering. You'd crank that handle with all your might, building up tension until the motorcycle and its fearless rider would shoot off at incredible speeds. Living rooms became stunt arenas as Evel sailed over makeshift ramps, crashed into furniture, and occasionally terrorized the family pet. The best part was the unpredictability. You never quite knew where Evel would land, which led to countless broken lamps and excited explanations to parents. And while Evel was jumping through our living rooms, another unlikely hero was dancing into our hearts: Disco Mickey Mouse record. In a decade defined by disco, even Disney's main mouse couldn't resist getting into the groove. This album wasn't just any Disney record, it was Mickey Mouse going full disco fever. The sight of Mickey in a white leisure suit on the album cover was strange enough, but hearing him sing Macho Duck was an experience that would stay with you forever. Kids and parents alike found themselves inexplicably drawn to these bizarre Disney disco fusion tracks, creating some truly unforgettable family dance parties. Speaking of unforgettable items from the 70s, here's one that still puzzles people today: the Monchhichi doll that somehow became popular.
Happy, happy Monchhichi. I love you, Monchhichi.
Part monkey, part baby, and entirely inexplicable by today's standards, Monchhichi dolls were an unstoppable craze. These peculiar little creatures, with their thumb-sucking habits and soft fur, captured hearts despite, or perhaps because of, their weird appearance. They came with different outfits and accessories, and their popularity spawned an entire collection frenzy. Nobody quite understood why they were so appealing, but that didn't stop every kid from wanting one. But if Monchhichi dolls defined how we played, our next item defined how we smelled. The overwhelming scent of Love's Baby Soft perfume.
This Christmas, love is baby soft, the fragrance for the moment of discovery.
The 1970s had a distinct smell, and for many teenage girls, it was Love's Baby Soft perfume. This powdery, innocent fragrance came in a pink and white bottle that looked more like baby powder than perfume, and that was exactly the point. It was marketed as the perfect first perfume, with its subtle baby powder scent that parents would approve of. Of course, subtle went out the window when every girl in school was wearing it, creating a cloud of baby soft that could be detected from 3 hallways away. And while young girls were drowning themselves in baby soft, another product was making mealtime more colorful: the original Kraft mac and cheese box design.
Macaroni and cheese, a rich, creamy cheese sauce you know they're gonna like.
That distinctive blue box with 3 bowls of macaroni on the front was more than just packaging. It was a promise of comfort food at its finest. The cheese powder inside was an almost radioactive shade of orange that would stain everything it touched, from wooden spoons to plastic containers. But that artificial color was part of its charm. Kids would watch in amazement as the powder transformed into a creamy sauce, creating what many considered the perfect meal. The original box design became so iconic that parents could spot it from the other end of the grocery aisle, usually because their kids were pointing and begging for it. Speaking of things that made parents uncomfortable in the 70s, Jovan musk oil commercials that were way too sexy for TV. The 70s were breaking social barriers, and nothing proved this more than the notorious Jovan musk oil commercials. With their soft focus shots and passionate scenarios, these ads pushed the boundaries of what could be shown on TV. Each commercial featured couples in romantic encounters, all supposedly entranced by this mysterious fragrance. Parents would frantically reach for the remote when these came on, which naturally made kids even more curious. The campaigns were filled with sultry whispers, meaningful glances, and enough steam to fog up your TV screen. Everyone remembered the ads, even if they never bought the product. And while Jovan was making waves on TV, another 70s icon was taking over living rooms. The woven rattan peacock chairs in every living room. The peacock chair wasn't just furniture, it was the throne of the 70s living room. With its dramatic fan-like back and intricate weaving, it transformed anyone sitting in it into instant royalty. These massive chairs became the focal point of every trendy home. Despite being remarkably impractical, they took up enormous space, occasionally snagged clothing, and could be surprisingly uncomfortable. Yet their majestic presence was undeniable. Family photos from the era inevitably featured someone posed in these woven wonders, looking like they were about to issue a royal decree. But while peacock chairs were a stable presence, our next item was anything but the horror of dropping an 8-track tape. Mid-song. The 8-track tape was the epitome of both technological progress and frustration in the 70s. These bulky cartridges brought portable music to the masses, but at a price. With no rewind function, dropping your tape meant potentially losing your place forever. The notorious K-chunk sound as it switched tracks would interrupt songs at the worst possible moments. Yet we endured these quirks because it meant we could take our music anywhere. Car trips became mobile concerts, even if every 4th song was interrupted by that dreaded track change. Speaking of portable technology that defined the era, the electronic quarterback handheld game that everyone had. A single red LED dot somehow managed to capture all the excitement of football in this revolutionary handheld game. Players would guide their quarterback through a field of opposing defenders represented by other blinking dots. The simple beeping sounds somehow transformed into roaring crowds in our imaginations. Despite its basic technology, kids would spend hours creating elaborate plays and staging comeback victories. The batteries never seemed to last long enough, but that didn't stop anyone from playing until those dots finally faded away. And while some kids were scoring touchdowns, others were exploring sweeter pursuits. The Lifesaver flavored lip glosses. Lip Smacker created a revolution in 1975 when they introduced lip glosses that actually tasted like Lifesaver's candy. These colorful tubes became instant must-haves for every young girl. The flavors were remarkably accurate, from wild cherry to butter rum, leading to constant reapplication and occasional sneaky tastes. Girls would collect and trade them like precious gems, comparing flavors and debating which was best. The glosses weren't just makeup, they were social currency in school hallways, with rare flavors becoming particularly valuable trading commodities. And speaking of collecting things that seemed valuable, the 1976 Bicentennial quarter fad. Every kid in America suddenly became an amateur numismatist during the Bicentennial. The special 1976 quarters, featuring the colonial drummer on the reverse side, created a collecting frenzy unlike anything before. Kids would check every piece of change, convinced they'd found a rare variation worth thousands. The truth was, these quarters were produced in massive quantities and weren't particularly valuable, but that didn't stop children from hoarding them in piggy banks and shoeboxes, certain they were sitting on a future fortune. Some kids even refused to spend them, creating their own personal treasury. And while some were collecting quarters, others were organizing their school supplies in style. The Charlie's Angels Trapper Keeper.
When it comes to organization, you either got it or you don't. The Trapper, from me.
The Trapper Keeper wasn't just a school supply, it was a statement. And if you had the Charlie's Angels edition, you were automatically the coolest kid in class. These organizational marvels with their Velcro closures and folder compartments became status symbols in school hallways. The sound of ripping Velcro would echo through classrooms as students retrieved their homework. The Charlie's Angels version, featuring Farrah Fawcett's iconic hairstyle, was particularly coveted. Every time you opened it, you felt like you were receiving a top-secret mission. But for simpler entertainment, there was always our magnetic friend, the magic of Willy. There was something hypnotic about dragging magnetic iron filings across Willy's bald face with that little magnetic wand. This simple toy provided endless entertainment as you gave Willy different hairstyles, mustaches, and beards. The real challenge was trying to recreate the suggested styles on the package without making a mess. Inevitably, you'd end up with all the filings clustered in one spot, giving Willy a rather unfortunate appearance. Sometimes the magnetic dust would escape, leading to mysterious black specks appearing around the house. Speaking of household items that defined the era, the orange and brown Tupperware cups. These virtually indestructible vessels were a staple in every 70s kitchen. The distinctive harvest gold and burnt orange colors perfectly matched the decade's aesthetic. You could drop them, throw them, use them as bath toys. Nothing seemed to damage these plastic warriors. They survived countless dishwasher cycles, picnics, and sibling fights. The signature burp seal of their lids became a familiar sound in homes across America. Some families still have these cups today. Their colors barely faded despite decades of use. And while Tupperware was dominating our kitchens, another show was dominating our TV screens: the Gong Show and its bizarre acts. Chuck Barris's variety show took the concept of talent competitions and turned it completely upside down. This wasn't about finding the next big star, it was about embracing the weird, the wonderful, and the occasionally terrible. Contestants would perform outrageous acts, hoping to avoid the dreaded gong that would end their performance. The show gave us memorable acts like Gene the Dancing Machine and the Unknown Comic. Parents worried it was rotting our brains, but kids couldn't get enough of its chaotic energy. The smell of freshly opened Playmobile figures. There was something magical about cracking open a new Playmobile set that went beyond just the toys inside. That distinct plastic smell became synonymous with childhood excitement in the 70s. Each figure came with that unmistakable aroma that somehow made the whole experience more special. Kids would take deep breaths of that new toy scent before diving into play. The smell was so distinctive that even today, opening vintage Playmobile can transport people right back to their childhood bedrooms. It wasn't just a toy, it was a full sensory experience. And while some toys delighted our noses, others tested our pain threshold. The underrated but addictive Clackers.
Can't break the new original Miracle Clackers, and they're shatterproof too. Look for this package.
These seemingly simple toys, 2 acrylic balls attached to a string, became an obsession despite, or perhaps because of, their potential for injury. The goal was to get them clacking together above and below your hand through rhythmic motion. The satisfying clack sound when you got it right was addictive, even as the balls regularly smashed into knuckles and wrists. Eventually banned for safety concerns, these beloved bruise makers taught kids valuable lessons about physics, timing, and pain tolerance. Speaking of things that captivated us despite their flaws, the infamous Jell-O 1, 2, 3 dessert that separated itself.
Jell-O 1, 2, 3. The only dessert that tops itself.
General Foods created kitchen magic with this seemingly impossible dessert that separated into 3 distinct layers as it set. The bottom was firm like regular Jell-O, the middle was creamy, and the top was like foam, all from one mix. Every 70s mom attempted to make this wonder dessert, though results varied wildly. Kids would watch the glass in the fridge, amazed as the layers slowly formed. It didn't always work perfectly, but when it did, it felt like having space-age food in your own kitchen. But if Jell-O could walk down walls, our next item could too. The wacky pack of wacky wall walkers.
Coming at you free, your own wacky wall walker.
These sticky octopus-like toys captured imaginations with their simple but mesmerizing ability to walk down walls. Thrown against any smooth surface, they would slowly flip and flop their way downward, leaving slight marks that drove parents crazy. They came in wild colors and designs, and despite being basically just sticky rubber, they provided hours of entertainment. Kids would stage races down windows and mirrors until they inevitably collected too much dust to stick anymore. And speaking of things stuck in our heads, the McDonald's "You Deserve a Break Today" jingle.
You deserve a break today at McDonald's.
This wasn't just a commercial jingle, it was the anthem of 70s fast food. The catchy tune wormed its way into everyone's brain and refused to leave. Written by advertising legends, the song became so popular that people would actually sing it in their daily lives. The full commercial featured a diverse cast, cleaning the restaurant while singing, making mopping floors look like Broadway entertainment. It was so successful that it's still considered one of the greatest advertising campaigns of all time. And while some things were golden arches gold, the short-lived space-age silver Christmas trees. Nothing said future in the 70s quite like an aluminum Christmas tree. These shimmering metallic creations caught the light from the color wheel placed beneath them, transforming living rooms into discotheque wonderlands. The branches were like metallic needles that could prick your fingers if you weren't careful, and decorating them was an art form. Too many ornaments would make the branches droop. Some families even kept them up year-round as modernist sculptures. They were the perfect symbol of how the 70s viewed the future: shiny, synthetic, and slightly dangerous. And while some homes sparkled with silver, TV sets glowed with something far more colorful: the weirdness of HR Puffinstuff.
Help, Puffinstuff! Something's wrong with Jimmy!
Jimmy, what happened to you? Why are you walking that way?
This children's show seemed like it was created in someone's fever dream. With its talking flute, wicked witch, and a dragon mare, it defined psychedelic children's entertainment. Everything on Living Island seemed to have a face and could talk, from trees to boats to buttons. The show only produced 17 episodes, but its impact on 70s culture was enormous. Kids were mesmerized by its strange characters and catchy songs, while parents wondered what exactly their children were watching. The show's creator always denied any drug influence, but nobody quite believed him. Speaking of cultural phenomena that took over before we were ready, the E.T. phone home craze before the movie even came out.
E.T. phone home.
In a marketing miracle, E.T. merchandise was everywhere before most people had even seen the film. The phrase "phone home" became part of everyday language months before audiences understood its context. Kids were carrying E.T. lunchboxes, wearing E.T. t-shirts, and begging for E.T. toys without knowing the full story. The anticipation built to such levels that when the movie finally released, it felt like everyone in America was seeing it together. It was perhaps the first time marketing outpaced the actual product. And speaking of things we believed in, the coolness of owning a mood ring.
The original multicolor mood ring. This is the ring that senses your deepest feelings.
These mysterious pieces of jewelry promised to reveal your inner emotions through changing colors. Everyone had a dog-eared color chart explaining what each shade meant, though no one could quite agree on the interpretations. The rings would turn black when they stopped working, which we all pretended meant we were in a very deep mood. Despite knowing they just reacted to temperature, kids still believed these rings had magical properties. Teachers had to ban them because students spent more time staring at their hands than at their books. But if mood rings were questionable science, our next item was pure deception. The mystery of the sea monkeys that never looked like the ads.
Sea monkeys, the amazing instant pets for the whole family.
Comic book ads promised magical underwater humanoid pets, complete with crowns and happy families. What arrived in the mail was a packet of brine shrimp that barely resembled the advertised illustrations. Yet, somehow, the disappointment of reality didn't diminish their appeal. Kids would eagerly watch their bowls of water, hoping their sea monkeys would eventually evolve into the smiling creatures from the ads. Despite never quite living up to expectations, these tiny creatures taught many children their first lessons about responsibility and false advertising. Before we dive into our next batch of memories, what was your most disappointing mail order experience from the 70s? Drop a comment below, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you're enjoying this nostalgic journey. The awkwardness of Fonzie for President buttons. Everyone wanted to be as cool as the Fonz from Happy Days, so when these campaign-style buttons appeared, they spread through schools like wildfire. These weren't just regular fan merchandise, they represented a cultural moment when a TV character became bigger than the show itself. Kids would wear them proudly, giving thumbs up and saying, "Aye," in hallways. The buttons became such a phenomenon that some schools had to ban them because students were too busy trying to be cool to pay attention in class. And speaking of things that commanded attention in the 70s, the unforgettable smell of the strawberry shortcake dolls.
A strawberry shortcake garden house is where you can play party and barbecue there.
These scented dolls were an assault on the senses in the best possible way. Each character had its own distinct fruity smell that was meant to last forever, and somehow many still retain their scent decades later. Kids would collect them obsessively, creating entire berry-scented kingdoms in their rooms. The aroma was so strong that you could tell if someone had one in their backpack from 3 desks away. Parents complained about the overwhelming sweetness, but that only made them more appealing to kids. While some toys appealed to our sense of smell, others challenged our sense of reality. The popularity of pet rocks.
Introduced in 1975, was billed as the 70s alternative to Man's Best Friend.
The ultimate proof that 70s marketing could sell anything. These were literally just rocks in a cardboard carrier with air holes and a care manual. Creator Gary Dahl became a millionaire selling ordinary stones at $4 each. Kids would name their rocks, create personalities for them, and carry them everywhere. The genius was in the training manual, which included instructions like, "Your pet rock will not eat, need walks, or make messes." It was ridiculous. Everyone knew it was ridiculous. And that's exactly why people loved it. And if pet rocks weren't quirky enough, the disco duck record everyone owned. This novelty song by Memphis DJ Rick Dees somehow became a legitimate hit, reaching #1 on the Billboard charts. The track featured a Donald Duck-like voice singing disco, and despite, or because of, its silliness, it was everywhere in 1976. Kids would do the accompanying dance at parties, complete with duck movements. Parents couldn't escape it. Their children played it repeatedly until the vinyl wore out. It was simultaneously the best and worst thing about disco's peak. While Disco Duck was making us dance, the goosebumps from a $6 Million Man action figure.
$6 Million Man Mission Control Center, new from Kenner. Figure sold separately.
Steve Austin's action figure was a technological marvel, with a rubber skin arm you could roll up to reveal bionic parts underneath. The crowning feature was a tiny telescope in his eye that actually worked. You could look through the back of his head and see through his eye. Kids would spend hours making the signature bionic sound effect while playing. It was one of the first action figures that did more than just pose, setting a new standard for toy technology. And speaking of technological advances, the weirdness of the Baby Alive doll that ate food.
New Baby Alive comes with everything you see here.
This doll pushed the boundaries of what toys could do, for better or worse. Baby Alive could eat special food packets mixed with water, and then, amazingly or disturbingly, would actually process it. Parents weren't thrilled about the mess, but kids were fascinated by this eerily realistic function. The doll came with diapers that actually needed changing after feeding. The mechanical chewing sound it made was slightly creepy, and the food often stained everything it touched. But that didn't stop it from becoming a must-have toy. And while some dolls were eating and digesting, the McDonald's Shamrock Shake before it became a trend.
I always turn green when McDonald's has delicious green Shamrock Shakes.
Before limited-time menu items were common, the Shamrock Shake was a true seasonal event. This mint green shake appeared mysteriously around St. Patrick's Day and disappeared just as quickly. The original recipe was different from today's version, somehow creamier and more mysterious. Its vibrant green color looked almost radioactive, but that was part of its charm. Finding a McDonald's that had it was like striking gold, and kids would beg their parents to drive across town just to get one. But if the Shamrock Shake was intriguing, our next item was downright dangerous. The Pop Rocks and soda myth that freaked everyone out.
Introducing Pop Rocks Crackling Candy. They'll burst all over your mouth.
The urban legend that mixing Pop Rocks and soda would make your stomach explode became the great playground debate of the 70s. Everyone had a friend of a friend who knew someone who tried it. The rumor was so persistent that the FDA set up a hotline to reassure worried parents. And Lifesavers, the maker of Pop Rocks, had to send letters to school principals debunking the myth. Of course, this only made kids more curious about trying the forbidden combination. While some kids were conducting soda experiments, the Star Wars Cantina playset that every kid wanted.
Kenner's new Star Wars creature Cantina, action figures sold separately.
This playset was the crown jewel of Star Wars toys, a perfect recreation of the movie's most exotic location. The detailed bar, the weird alien figures, the swinging door, it had everything needed to recreate that famous scene. Kids would spend hours creating elaborate storylines with their action figures, mixing Star Wars characters with other toys to create bizarre crossovers. The tiny drinks that came with it were constantly getting lost under furniture, but finding one years later was like discovering buried treasure. And finally, what might be the most cherished memory of all? Waking up on Saturday morning to watch cartoons with sugary cereal.
Join me in a good breakfast featuring Post Super Sugar Crisp. Eat 'em once.
You want 'em twice.
This wasn't just a morning routine, it was a sacred ritual. Kids would wake up early, grab their favorite cereal, the sugary kind parents only bought for weekends, and camp out in front of the TV. The lineup of cartoons was perfectly curated, and missing even one episode felt like a tragedy. The combination of sugar rush and animation created a magical few hours where nothing else mattered. The hardest decision was choosing between different cereals, each promising toy surprises inside.